forthcoming fiscal plan. And our subject tonight is the 2026 budget. What does it mean for the ordinary citizen? What does it mean for you? And what does it mean for your pocket? To join us dissect this very subject, we're joined in studio by Mr. Denford Mutashu, President of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers, Brian Manganye, a legal expert, Agnes Magunje, Chairperson, Informal Traders Empowerment Association. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to The Chase.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Fantastic. Now, please note that the views expressed on the program do not reflect those of ZTN Prime or those of Zim Papers Limited, but of course are the views and opinions of our guests here on The Chase. Now, to our, of course, viewers, remember to follow us on our social media handles at Zim Papers TV Network as well as at ZTN Prime. Your views and your thoughts are important to us. Let us know what you think about the subject at hand. Now, to get the ball rolling, Zimbabwe's recent 2026 pre-budget seminar was held under the theme Enhancing Drivers of Economic Growth and Transformation Toward Vision 2030. What specific tangible structural reforms should the Treasury prioritize in this year's budget to unlock real value addition, particularly in critical sectors such as agro-processing, manufacturing, and logistics? I'll start with you, Mr. Mutashu, then I'll move to you, Chairperson of the Informal Traders Empowerment Association.
Thank you. I think the minister has already set the tone. Zimbabwe's economy is growing and is rising. The target of 6% GDP is attainable. And what is quite essential is that there is a guiding target, which is Vision 2030. So the steps that we are going to take to achieve Vision 2030 through prudence budgeting, prudence monetary policy planning is quite key. And the minister has been very, pragmatic to say government will indeed maintain fiscal discipline. There is not going to be printing of money, just like we saw in the yesteryear budgets. And the fiscal discipline is certainly then going to ensure that we contain and maintain, we contain inflation, we maintain price stability. We also ensure that there is going to be a revenue, domestic revenue generation. Remember, most of the development that you can see and testify that has happened in Zimbabwe, infrastructure development, construction of roads. Right now we are talking of the construction of Blue Whale Victoria Falls Road. But after a number of roads have actually been revitalized, Harare, Masvingo, Mutare, Harare, and many others. It is an indication that Zimbabwe has managed to achieve that which most nations have failed to do by using or utilizing its own domestic resources. That is very fundamental. And I think a few days ago, you saw His Excellency President Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa hosting Africa's richest billionaire, Mr. Aliko Dangote. But before that, you also saw the IMF giving thumbs up to Zimbabwe and in actually acknowledging that Zimbabwe's economy is growing and Zimbabwe's economy cannot be ignored. So here is what it takes or what it is for the ordinary Zimbabweans. If you look at the deployment of resources, the expectation by the majority of Zimbabweans is to the promotion of social safety nets. Health is very fundamental and paramount. Of course, the country has seen insurmountable number of hospitals, clinics, health centers that have been constructed across the country, schools that have also been constructed, both public and private schools. But the budget must continue to support the construction of public schools. We need to ensure that public schools are growing in numbers side by side with private schools. Because right now, if you go into any city, you will find a private school, right from kindergarten up to high school. So this is something that is very key to the Zimbabweans. But of course, the projection that the minister made is practical because we are witnessing a robust and growing agricultural sector anchored on Fumvudza, Intkwasa, anchored of course on the presidential input support, and of course anchored on deliberate government support in agricultural production. Self-sufficiency in wheat, self-sufficiency in maize, self-sufficiency in many other small grains. But of course, moving further, the agro-processing value chain will then touch the manufacturing sector, which for the first time has actually overtaken the retail and wholesale sector in terms of its contribution to the GDP after the government rebased the economy. And of course, the retail and wholesale sector now contributing an average of 11.6% to the GDP. But where you see the mining sector, the manufacturing sector, the agricultural sector contributing more to the GDP, it is a very healthy indication of an economy that is deliberately promoting production and productivity. An economy that is deliberately promoting domestication of value addition and beneficiation, and ensuring that we reduce the dependence on imports. Right now, if you walk into any supermarket, more than 80% of the goods that you will find are locally manufactured, which is a positive, and it has come out of deliberate government support through policy.
Right. Much to decipher there from that very submission. I will come to you, Ms. Magunje, with the subject, the very same subject, to say the same theme, enhancing drivers of economic growth and transformation toward Vision 30, underscoring the pre-budget seminar that was held in Bulawayo. What do you make of that against the pretext of the national budget that is expected in a few days from now?
Okay, thank you, Eben. Let me just get back to the surplus that was indicated previously. So we are looking forward to say this time around, we want to see more implementation. We want to see resources really being allocated in time so that we can achieve, the expected outcomes. However, when we are looking at the Vision 2030 and the NDS2, we are excited to say we can already see, transformation in industrial sector where the industries are being revived, which is a very critical point of development if we're looking at really creating employment and addressing the issue of the informal sector. So it also has to be very intentional to say, where are we placing this? I like the idea that now we are looking beyond Harare, and we are looking at expansion in all these other cities where we want to see growth also taking part in those areas, and then we can be able to say this creation of a new middle income economy by 2030 can really be achieved, because when we start also looking at manufacturing, how we're also going to transform value addition into our products, be it the products from mining, the products from agriculture. I think there are a lot of gaps there where we can see that if we really address these critical areas and really address the value chains and be able to come up with a value addition to our production, we can then realize even a greater impact. When we also look at infrastructure development, the housing structures that are also being created in the communities that we see in Harare, we would also want that to be to be looked into in other cities. We want to develop cities that address a whole spectrum of development. I like what Mr. Mtashu said about building schools. So when we are envisioning we should have a clear vision of what 2030 should look like. We want to be addressed by this vision where we also can place ourselves and say, this is where I see myself, this is where I see my family. So when we are looking at expansion, when we are looking at growth, when we are looking at how we can then turn the economy around fully, we have to be very cognizant of all issues that are critical to be addressed, the social issues, the economic, and you know, all the other spaces, to say, even as we are transporting let me say the civic services, where registration, where devolution is, let's have a holistic approach about the 2030. Let's not only minimize it to certain areas and certain sectors, but let's say we must have a holistic approach to it, to say, if we are achieving this middle income economy, if the budget is going to address, it should not address certain areas, and then we also realize a surplus where other things have not been implemented. So we're looking forward to a fully applied budget, which has been fully again exhausted, so that we don't have a surplus in the money, but a deficit in a lot of the projects that are supposed to be implemented. But we are very excited of the progress that has happened so far. We are seeing the positive results of some of the policy changes. We are looking forward to actual implementation, because, you know, the announcements are there, but when we get on the ground, things are not yet being implemented. So we would also want to see a fast tracking of these policies being put into action by the Parliament, so that, you know, it then becomes practical on the ground.
Right. I'll come to the legal expert with the question. When you look at the structure of the Zimbabwean economy, you've got Zimbabwe being rated as the world's most informalized economy globally, and the informal sector employs more than 65% of the Zimbabwean population. Now, from a legal perspective, as Treasury prepares for the 2026 national budget, what legal mechanisms should could integrate the informal economy into mainstream growth in a way that's both inclusive and sustainable?
Firstly, I would want to say what the Minister of Finance has done in terms of policies, in looking in terms of the sectors, is commendable. But if it remains as a policy, then we have a problem. For example, we have a bureaucratic system in terms of registration of businesses. For example, we are behind South Africa, where we have 15 licenses for one to do business in Zimbabwe. In Zambia, it's 11. In South Africa, there's 7. So we need to change in terms of how we do registration of these businesses. So we need to have a one-stop shop where we have all the registration. And I want to thank the President. He has highlighted that we are supposed to change in terms of the levies and the registration by 50% to 70%. So, for example, in agriculture, farmers, they are no longer small, mediums, and medium farmers. They are no longer required to have registration of farmers registering certificate, which is commendable. But what is needed now is having an act which supports that policy. And in terms of transport, we have many policies that are there. But if we don't have an act which support, or a statutory instrument which support those policies, they are just hopeful wishes. Sorry to say this, they are just hopeful wishes, but they need to have to be changed to become legal instruments. For example, the ministers announced that there are supposed to be changes in terms of 12 sectors. I'm so glad in terms of tourism. Zimbabwe now is rated the first by the Forbes magazine because of these policies and these different acts that they've been implemented. And in terms of mining, we are going away with the 1961 Act, coming up with the new mining bills, which is also commendable, which is looking on the current of our mining sector. So having these policies to become acts, it will become a realistic view of us achieving different things. One of the area which is which is still a problematic issue is in terms of the informal sector. The government is still trying by having, for example, they have widened this act, the Business Entries and Companies Act, to include this informal sector. So I think they are supposed maybe to have different incentives that they are supposed to maybe to encourage the informal sector to to become registered.
Right, you mentioned the mining bill among other pieces of documentation that would need to be passed and some changes. The mining bill that you speak about has been in the pipeline for the past 15 years. In fact, I sat down with the Minister of Mines about 4 years ago, and that particular document was still very much in the pipeline. May you speak to the aspect of expediting some of these documents so that they get to be in place sooner rather than later?
I think that is a very, very important thing, because there have been like 10 years in terms of different views of mining that have been coming up. But I like this view which came in June, which came in June about these mines. Now it includes the small scale miners, artisanal miners. They now have a meaning because they were excluded from all these views in the Act. But if you look at this view, it's including the artisanal miners, it is including the small scale miners. Now it's encouraging Zimbabweans to be more into mining. But what was lacking was only the definitions of how one can be go into the mining of diamonds. So now I like the debate which is going in terms of this mining, which is very, very positive now, because now it's including the artisanal miners, it is including the small scale miners. It's not only now including the foreign investor. So I think now it's user friendly in terms of all including everyone.
Right, Mr. Mutasu, critics argue that industrial performance has been hamstrung by persistent electricity shortages, rising logistics costs, and limited access to the much needed foreign currency. Now, these constraints have driven up production costs. How do you interpret the government's allocation priorities toward infrastructure and energy in this context?
I think this deliberate promotion of the country becoming self-sufficient on energy. You may also have seen that the Gwai Shangani Dam is in the pipeline, and we could see some small hydro projects there. Kunzi Dam is also one particular aspect, and there is also a promotion of generation of captive energy, like alternative energy sources like solar. I think you may have seen a number of solar farms that have actually germinated across the country. And also even one particular example in Harare, one of the suburbs, I think it's in Glenview, where there's a project where houses are going to be farming energy. They will have solar panels on top of their roofs, so that additional energy generated can actually be redirected to the back to the power lines and to the grid. So I think we need also to ensure that in terms of infrastructure development, there has been a lot that has happened. And yes, infrastructure like roads, networks, rail networks contribute to the cost of doing business. But so far, I think there have been a number of trabablas interchanges. There's one here at Mbudzi, rather in Harare, Trabablas, the main Trabablas interchange. There's one that is being constructed, a mini Trabablas at Mavuku Tenoff, and also there's one in Mutare at the Christmas Pass. And these are deliberate efforts to try and ensure that, one, the roads are dualized. Two, that also reduces accidents. Three, that also promotes efficient logistic and transportation of goods and services. But alongside that, the minister indicated also that there is deliberate need to revamp our railway system. They already, I am quite positive because of the work that has been invested in bringing in new locomotives and also revamping our railway lines and ensuring that the connectivity, in railway connectivity, it will reduce the over dependence and congestion that is coming from heavy duty trucks that are also even destroying the roads that we are constructing. So if that is reduced, then it means a lot of cargo in the country is certainly going to be transported through rail. But we also have air cargo. Mutare Airport is since opened. That is actually adding on to the already newly built Harare Robert Mugabe International Airport. We also have got Joshua Mkabuko International Airport. We've got Victoria Falls International Airport. I think if you look at infrastructure development, the country, and in fact, under the Second Republic, I think we should actually appreciate that using our own domestic resources, it is something that we need to continue with the trajectory. I'm happy the minister indicated also that export earnings and remittances are actually going up. And this actually is a sign of confidence in an economy where you also see investments, new investments that are coming into the manufacturing sector, new investments that are coming into the mining sector, new investments that are coming into the tourism sector. Those cannot happen in an environment that is not growing, in an environment that is not stable. And remember, investors come, they're actually drawn by your intention to improve infrastructure, road network, rail network, air transport. So I think this is intentional by government to ensure that the budget is certainly going to support movement of goods, easier movement of people in the city. But it is also telling, through devolution that the development that we talk about, it is not centered only in the capitals. It is actually spreading across the provinces. There are a number of projects that have come. And remember, I think just a few days ago, you saw the Minister of State for Mashonaland West Province touring a number of new projects that have germinated in the province. And this is testament that development now is decentralized. And the president's mantra is being realized of leaving no one, no place behind. And actually, in addition to that, you may also see that a few years back, we didn't have our currency. Now we've got the Zimbabwe gold, the zinc.
Right, we'll talk about the currency issue a little bit later. I will come to you as a representative of the SMEs that are a significant contributor to Zimbabwe's GDP, the employment in this country. One of the challenges there is a lack of access to funding or reasonable lines of credit. Zimbabwe is one of the highest interest rates, not just in Africa, but in the world, and 35% being the policy rate. What does that mean for SMEs, and what kind of reforms can be, of course, implemented from the fiscal side? Of course, interest rates, that's the aspect of the monetary policy and the central bank, but from a fiscal perspective, what should or could be done to bridge that particular gap?
Okay, thank you, Eben. I think, firstly, we have to understand that, we have a very rigid financial policy, especially when it comes to SMEs and the informal sector. We don't see flexibility in facilitation of those loans. They are very stringent things that are needed for you to unlock that money. But what is very critical is, as we are going forward now, we are also realizing that after the Zimstat assessment of where we are in the informal sector and the formal sector, we realize now that 76% of businesses are informal. So this is a recent statistic from 2024, 2025. So if even the banking sector is supposed to really transform and realize that where does this sector also go? Where do the SMEs go if only 24% is in the formal? So we've been also trying to interact with the bankers to say, look, if you financial institutions don't also transform, if you also don't open up, if you continue to be rigid and to request for collateral that is out of reach, to also offer these high interest rates, you are also going to face challenges in that sector in finding revival of the banking system and also the trust getting back to where it is, because that money that they are also supposed to be lending is supposed to be also coming from the depositors. So we are saying the confidence has to also ensure that there is flexibility in accommodating the needs of the SMEs. So we want to move away from rigidity and become more flexible and realize that financial inclusion is really realized by all sectors of the business. So I think it's something that government has actually facilitated finance for the SMEs, but it's the access to that finance where there are so many stringent measures that are being put forward by the financial institutions, by the banks, the microfinances. So we're saying, let's be flexible, let's come up with products that are informed by the needs of the sector. And then we can see that transformation, we can see the inclusion also transforming the sector and the benefits being realized.
Now, both the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act place strong emphasis on transparency, accountability, and the prudent use of public funds. Question then is, how can Parliament and Treasury strengthen the 2026 budget and ensure compliance with financial laws, restoring trust between government and taxpayers?
One of the things, if you look on the pre-budget meeting, one of the areas which the minister said was on the issues of the challenges which come with that, what you have said. So there is need for fiscal consolidation, and also there is need for certainty in terms of the policies. There is need for transparency in terms of what is on the ground. For example, how they are supposed to include the informal sector. They are supposed to have tax reforms. So I'm sure different 12 sectors that are there, the minister said they are supposed to come up with the different acts and statutory instruments which support those policies. And I'm so positive in terms of that there will be more transparency. For example, if you look in terms of the small of the small scale miners, let me go to the small scale miners and artisan. They are bringing more in terms of gold into than the big miners. So there's need for the promotion, or there's need for the encouragement of those policies to become acts which support different sectors that are bringing positive change in the economy. So it all hinges on on being transparent. It all hinges on not changing the different policies. There's need supposed to be a certainty in terms of policy, and there's also need of fiscal consolidation. So I think if we do this, the economy will be positive.
Right. Before we move to discuss the subject of the taxes and what they mean and expectations and what would improve the ease of doing business in Zimbabwe, let's talk about the aspect of having a people-centric budget that looks into the affairs of women, that looks into the affairs of the privileged, the vulnerable in our society and in our communities. What would be your sentiment around that, Ms. Makunje?
Thank you for that question. I really love, the direction you're taking, because when we come to vulnerable communities, I think there is a lot that still needs to be done. I think the current focus, I know, is we want to really change this trajectory and really move forward to this glamorous new vision that we have. But we are also forgetting that there are vulnerable groups. There are, we have women who still find challenges in maternity wards. We are looking at children, childbirth. There's a lot that is happening on the health sector. Also, when we look at issues of water, I'm glad that now, the Jeffrey Morton is being... We see that those issues affect women mostly because of the roles of women. Women are the caregivers. We are supposed to be the ones who make sure that the household functions. And so if those critical needs are still not addressed, we are going to find that there is going to be also a lot of diseases. We are getting into the rainy season. We want to have such issues really being looked into to say, where do women stand even in decision-making positions. We also want women to take more decision-making positions, because some of these budgets that are also going to go forward, we also want gender-sensitive budgeting, whereby, you know, we can see most of the money also going to social security, to social needs. Yes, we can put other priorities, but the first priority should also be social needs, which are where women really find themselves.
Right. I will relay a question that speaks to issues that affect the generality of Zimbabweans, specific to issues such as health and education. How important is it that sufficient allocations are made to these social aspects of the people, as it were? How can we ensure that we've got sufficient drugs throughout our health institutions? How can we ensure that we do have the necessary equipment in our public institutions without necessarily having to go to a private operator, a private surgery to get this procedure done and that test done? What can be done to ensure that these are done within the institutions that matter?
I think one of the areas that was lacking, for example, if you look on the youth, there was no Youth Act. And now the Minister of Youth is coming up with a Youth Act so that the youth can be included in terms of economic activities. So one of the areas that was lacking, it was because we have loopholes in terms of our acts and statutory instruments, which terms private sectors or tend to manipulate. So now we have been to change with these statutory instruments. For example, if you see now we have now public-private partnership in terms of public services. For example, waste management, there is now private-public partnership, and in terms of our water, in terms of Harare, there is public-private partnership. So the government, if it continues in this trajectory of including the private in economic activities, then we will have positive things. But if we don't change the acts and the statutory instruments, the private players or someone who may manipulate those things, and the generality of Zimbabwe will not benefit in terms of the services or the goods or anything that is of beneficial, which is the highlight of this economy.
But Mr. Mutashu, last year this time we were sitting on a $32 billion economy, and there's been a rebasing, and now we're looking at a $47 billion economy. And of course, we await more accurate figures as and when the budget is presented. Now, the question that I would ask is, how tangible is this $45 billion economy? What has changed between this time last year and this November 2025 as we're ready for the 2026 budget? How feasible, realistic, tangible is this growth for citizens in Zimbabwe?
I think it shows that the economy is growing, and it is anchored on practical, realistic sectorial growth. And if you look at mining, for example, there's been a number of mining houses that have been taken up, and the new entrants have also come into the space. You speak to gold mining, you speak to lithium, you speak to diamond, you speak to chrome, iron and steel. When you look at iron and steel, for example, right now, as we are sitting here, we used to import steel from South Africa. But a number of players in South Africa are actually coming to try and get steel from Zimbabwe. And a number of steel manufacturing plants in South Africa are threatened in terms of their survival because of the investment at Manise. So these are practical examples that we can't ignore, even if you look at the size and amount of investment that has been plowed in. And if you look at lithium, there are a number of lithium mines that have, in most of the provinces right now. And what we are moving towards actually right now is to beneficiate and add value on the lithium that we mine from the ground, so that before we export, we improve the quality of our exports and our earnings by ensuring that we add value we cannot continue to export raw minerals, because mining is one of the biggest export earners in the country. Then if you look at the general well-being of the economy, for example, the financial services sector, out of the banks that we have, there is no bank that is closed, that is closed shop. Banks are sound, they are well capitalized, I think, except one in terms of capitalization. The report that has come from the governor is actually very positive, because for an economy to grow, you need a sound financial services sector that provides various products and services to the market. What we are now focused on is ensuring that banks make available long-term funding to support the productivity and production that is currently taking place, so that we can borrow beyond even 2030, because most of the banks right now are only offering credits, offering loans that are time bound to 2030. Why? Because that is the period that the government has indicated that the monocurrency system will actually have taken center stage, where the country will actually have a sole currency, that is the Zimbabwe gold, the ZiG. So I think that those are some of the housekeeping issues that we need to sort out, but those housekeeping issues in the main cannot be pointed to mean that the country's economy is not growing. And then if you look at the issue of financial inclusion, I'm happy my sister spoke about it. We need to be financially inclusive as much as possible. I was talking at another discussion this afternoon, and I indicated that as long as we are sustaining a cash economy, it would be very difficult to formalize the economy. And it would also be very difficult to track the informal sector for it to begin to contribute to the fiscal revenue harmonization and generation. We need to ensure that we promote digitization. And I'm happy the minister spoke about it in the budget. We need to promote e-platforms, e-transacting, e-commerce, plastic money usage. And remember, at some stage, we were doing so well, even during COVID. I remember, boarding Zupco bus, you would just tap, you had a tap system. So we should not have stopped that. It should have encouraged us to actually make it spread across the economy. Even if someone walks into the supermarket, they should just use their card to tap and transact. Even if you are buying airtime, you just tap and transact. So these are some of the issues that then the budget must sort of look at, zero in on. Because we need to reduce the over-dependence on cash, because the cash economy promotes illicit, promotes leakages. Even the artisanal mining that my brother was talking about, it is vibrant. There are vibrant activities that are taking place within that particular sector. And if all the gold that is mined in that space was finding its way to Fidelity refineries, then definitely in terms of revenue, we could actually be swimming in a bigger surplus than the one that we are talking about today. So I think the leakages is one area. We need to fundamentally block or plug in all those leakages, so that our economy can actually experience the growth even that is we are anticipating, which is actually bigger than the one that the country is experiencing today.
Right, the GDP growth that Mr. Mutashu is talking about, has it translated to its physical equivalence for the ordinary citizen? Has it changed the earning ability of the Zimbabwean? I repeat, last year this time, we're sitting on a GDP size of 32 billion. Currently, according to Zimstat and Treasury, we are sitting on 45 billion United States dollars as an economy. Has that meant anything for the 45-year-old widow in Chendamboya? Has it translated to anything for the 62-year-old man in, of course, Cholocho or Jocholo for that particular matter?
Okay. I think maybe as clearly what Mr. Mtacho said, we still are in the building trajectory where we can see physically that, okay, we've got the Manize going on, we've got all these other things, the infrastructure development, but has it really now trickled down to really seeing the impact positively transforming the life of the ordinary person. I don't think it has as yet, but it's a change that needs to gradually get to that point whereby, once we have all the systems in place, once we say we have created enough employment, we have created enough schools to harbor our kids instead of having students going out of the country. Once we address those issues that are going to create employment, we are now going to start seeing the positive impact that is going to transform to the ordinary person. But however, as long as we also continue to use the US dollar as our overall currency, we are also going to find the challenges whereby we have all the investors who are coming with even their foreign products and moving away our people from their market where they are also supposed to be realizing the benefits. So it's I don't know, dangling the carrot and stick to say, once we also have let's also be very clear of who the investor is. I will give an example of in the artisanal mining sector where we have the Chinese who have come. These probably are not even they are not even registered with the Chinese embassy to realize that these people, we can account for them. These are private players who are also going to come. But they are also coming and they are also reaping more from us than our people are actually benefiting. So we are saying then it doesn't trickle down to the families that are supposed then to benefit from that, because the ordinary artisanal miner is there and they are just getting the little that they are supposed to, that they are negotiating on a level that is not even informed. And I like what my brother was saying. Once we have things, the law clearly stating who is where and who has the benefit, I think we can then now start seeing the positive trickling. And also the usage of the plastic money. I think it will be easier that way. Then you can now track to say, okay, so I've received so much, it has gone to the government. The government can also now have at least something that is positive to also look after its people. Because we have a lot of issues where even the pension funds that are being given are very minimum towards the contributions that people have, contributed in the past. So I think once we realize that the basket is bigger, let's also trickle it down. Even the taxes that we are imposing, I'll use for the radio license. The license is good for people who have those fancy cars and, to say you are going to pay $30. But is it really reasonable for someone who's earning $150, who still has the challenges of transport to get to work, because we are not yet there with the transport system. So we should really, be cognizant to say, are these issues going to really affect our people, or is it a positive impact? So yes, we are seeing the change, but I think it's a more top approach rather than a bottom approach. So we need to really address the grassroots so that we have stronger roots down there, and then we can see the economy really standing firm.
How strong are the roots in terms of some of the shifts that we have seen in the mid-term budget review? The Minister of Finance did announce that there would be some revisions in as far as the taxes for the different sectors of the economy, starting with the Minister of Agriculture, tourism, not the ministry, rather, the agricultural subsector, as it were, tourism among some of the sectors. There's also something for the retailers. A statement was issued to that particular effect. What is your sentiment regarding that? Is that going to scratch right where it itches?
Your question is, how strong is the base? The base is strong because we've got a budget surplus, we've got a stable exchange rate, we've got a stable currency, and we also have got fiscal prudence. And of course, then coming to your question, to then buttress and support the anger, we then need to come in and do the ease and cost of doing reforms in order to improve our competitiveness, because the agenda is to export more and to make our products competitive domestically and also in the export jurisdictions. But you cannot do that within the environment that we were operating under. And I'm very happy that His Excellency the President, Dr. Edim Nangaga, came out of his annual leave in January of 2025 to give and buttress and give direction in terms of the agency and the necessity to do those ease and cost of doing reforms across sectors. And where we are sitting as the retail and wholesale sector, we are quite happy that we have seen a number of reviews where 11 licensing requirements have been collapsed into one. And also, where one is required to have a liquor license, even when you have got a shop license, you no longer require that. The wholesale and retail license, when those two entities are under one establishment, will only require one license. And many others, some of them, for example, have been reduced from 1,860 to just a mere $20. So that is quite commendable. And for small to medium enterprises, there's a sliding scale approach that has been given, but a cap of $500 for a shop license or a business license for SMEs has actually been provided for under the reforms that the minister announced. So we are quite happy that these reforms across sectors, mining, tourism, agro-business, manufacturing, retail and wholesale, etc. Those certainly are. You've actually an albatross. They've been an Achilles heel to this economy. They entangled the economy and reduced our competitiveness in such a manner that exporting goods to within COMESA, within SADC has been very, very, very difficult, because those goods were being pushed away from the market by goods that are manufactured in those jurisdictions or that are brought into the country from the Far East and other places. But we are happy that the reforms, the intention has now been moved into letter and spirit. We now have the reforms. They've kicked in. Cabinet is coming in, is coming out, week in, week out, pronouncing the reforms for each and every other sector. And that is very positive. And it doesn't happen in many jurisdictions to have a government, conceding to those reforms. What is now required, if you ask me, those reforms now must cascade down to benefit the ordinary people. The businesses must take these reforms positively and do their own internal reforms in their own structures, reforms to ensure that they also streamline the costs that have been pushing prices. Because one area that we want to also feel as consumers, as ordinary people, is the pricing of goods and services. It is the reason why government actually had also to actually come through and with a program on counterfeit products that had proliferated across the economy. Because people were taking advantage of the laxity in terms of bringing in counterfeit goods into the country at the detriment of the health of the consumers and the ordinary people of Zimbabwe. But government has come firm. That actual program has actually now ensured that right now there are very few counterfeit products, especially the basic commodities that are coming into the country, and that is quite positive.
Right, and yet there isn't as yet an instrument that puts these reforms announced by Treasury into law. What needs to be done to ensure that what's communicated on the input side has a manifestation on the output, and as far as tangible results are concerned?
That means the government now, through the parliament, they're supposed now to be busy in terms of creating now the acts and the statutory instrument which support. And I'm happy like what the minister said. He said different sectors, they'll be implementing these policies to become acts in 6 months, which is very rare for a parliament to create different policies to become acts and statutory instrument in 6 months. So I'm sure if these policies now, they tend to be acts, they'll start to benefit the ordinary Zimbabwean. They'll start to benefit even that is in our mine. For example, if now the mine view passes, that is in our mine will become more happier, because now 40 hectares of that mining hectares is reserved for Zimbabwean. Transport sector is reserved for Zimbabwean. Retail sector is also reserved for Zimbabweans. So if these policies they tend to become acts, they start even to benefit the ordinary Zimbabwean. And also, if we have more in terms of tax reforms, That is where the challenge is. Let's have more in terms of these tax reforms to become acts and reduce the taxes. It will make our economy to boost.
Reduce taxes. Last week in Bulawayo, there was, of course, a concern raised by the parliamentarians, and as far as the intermediated money transfer tax, how it is increasing the cost of doing business, how it is also even affecting even the banking sector, as it were, resulting in mattress banking and all of these cash transactions that are taking place within the Zimbabwean economy. And the minister was so clear, and he said this intermediated money transfer tax contributes a good 8% to the revenue collections that are made by Zimra. And he went on to say, if we were to reduce the intermediated money transfer tax, then it would rear its head through an increase in terms of the value added tax. What does that mean for the citizen?
I think it's a...
This pretty much entails what you can expect in the budget.
Yes, so I think my brother clearly said that we really need to address this issue of taxation. I think we are heavily taxed, especially the ordinary person. You have clearly stated, as it was discussed in Plawayo, that when Zimra reduces the money transfer tax, then it's going to affect us on the VAT. But when we look at it, the whole point of the VAT and even the money transfer, and where the money transfers are coming, is because of the incompetence that the banking system had shown in the past. The unavailability also of cash and money in the system. That's where we found the gaps now being coming, that erupted of these money transfers, where Eco Cash, because we didn't have the means of exchange. So these covered that gap. But if we are saying now we're going to transform and we want that to be cut, I'm sure we have to now address that issue and say, how then do we address, where do we cut through? Where is Zimra saying it needs to really catch from more than the other? Is it us really giving Zimra the leeway, and whilst we leave the ordinary citizen ripped off of the little that they have because of these enormous taxes that come? So you will also find that it's actually promoting the invasion of tax. If we continuously to increase these taxes, we will then move away from those systems and create our own systems, and that is what we are trying to shun away from. Where hatisi kuda kuti tiende kumikando, hatisi kuda kuti tiite zvimadhiri zvedu zviri outside the system. So we want the system to be flexible. Let's move away from rigidity. I always say it's better to collect 5% of an elephant than to be seen collecting 100% of an ant. So if there is a flexibility, you will collect from more, and you will see the reformation and transformation of people coming from the informal sector, formalizing, because the system allows it. But if it's stringent, people will always remain out of the system.
Right, we are almost out of time. What are your expectations from a legal perspective, and what should be done so that there's a smooth sailing where some of the key reforms are concerned from a tax perspective? In just 1 minute.
Let's include the informal sector. Let's reduce the tax. Let's have tax reforms. It will encourage the informal sector to become formal. And also, let's speedize the acts and the statutory instruments in at least 6 months, so that this policy won't remain wishful thoughts.
Right, we have come to the end of our program. I would like to thank my guests, Denford Muntashe, President, Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers, Brian Manganya, legal expert, Agnes Magunje, Chairperson, Informal Traders Empowerment Association. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for appearing on The Chase.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic. And of course, that's a wrap. Do follow us on our social media handles, the Zim Papers TV network, as well as at ZTN Prime. Your views and your thoughts are important to us. Remember to catch us every Thursday, same time right here on ZTN Prime. I'm Eben Mabunda, the money man. Let them do what they do. When we do what we do, we mean business. Thank you for watching it. Have a good night.
Welcome to Cinema Buzz, where today we're taking a delightful trip down memory lane. Join us as we revisit the classic cartoon series that shaped our childhoods and defined a generation. From zany antics to unforgettable characters, we'll explore the shows that brought us laughter and joy. Get ready to relive those animated adventures. Let's dive right in.
The Powerpuff Girls, sugar, spice, and everything nice.
3 superpowered little girls are on a mission to save the world. Well, at least the city of Townsville. From